So I just want to give you a brief reminder of how one-point perspective works. Well, linear perspective in general and one-point perspective in particular. And then talk about those new objects that are out there. That's drawing really lightly. Surprises me. All right. So remember that in linear perspective, in general, you're going to always want to have that imaginary horizon line out there that represents the actual horizon, but also represents the eye level of the viewer. And then in one-point perspective, you're going to have that one vanishing point. And that in one-point perspective, when we draw any objects in one-point perspective, we first have that unforeshortened plane that makes up the side of that object that is closest to us, the viewer. And then to create those other planes, we have those lines referred to as orthogonals that lead back to the vanishing point, and we cap those planes off with vertical and horizontal lines. Again, every mark that we make on the page, that's a little off, let me fix that. Every line that we make on the page should be either vertical, horizontal, or headed toward that vanishing point, unless we're dealing with an object that is built around a circular plane or an ellipse. We've already talked about when it comes to the spheres out there, all you need is a circle, right? An unforeshortened circle, because it doesn't matter which way you look at that thing, it's going to always be that. But now we have an additional object out there. We have some cones, right? And these cones are also built around a circular plane on the bottom, right? And then the rest of the form sort of builds upward from there and tapers inward, right? So there's not really, no matter how I tilt this or look at it from any direction, there's no way to have any planes that go toward the vanishing point. So our approach to this won't necessarily involve the vanishing point. But again, it's built around a circular plane, right? If we could see the bottom of the cone, it would be a circle. And we've already talked about when we're foreshortening circles, right, that they sort of squeeze into an oval and become thinner and thinner and thinner as they become more foreshortened. And the same thing happens only on a horizontal axis when I foreshorten that back this way, right? So when we're going to draw a cone, we're going to pretend that we could see through it and we could see that circular plane that would be on the bottom, right? But it's not facing us like this, so it wouldn't be a circle. It'll be an ellipse. It'll be a foreshortened ellipse. And then we'll build up from there. So we've already talked about last week trying to get that circle in as close to one stroke as possible. This time around, I want you to also think about getting those foreshortened ellipses in one stroke as much as possible. Right? So essentially, we have a cone. I'm going to kind of make a quick representation here, right, that we end up seeing, but we know that if we could see through it, we would see the fullness of that ellipse down there at the bottom. So that's what we'll start with. We'll start with that, and then we'll build up from there. So wherever that cone would be sitting, wherever the bottom of it should be within my drawing, what I usually do is kind of mark a couple of marks to be like, yeah, that should fit within there. Right? However wide I feel like that cone should be. And then I'll get my ellipse in place. Remembering that the further away from my horizon line on my page, the more open and less foreshortened that ellipse would be. So that if this thing is way below my eye level, it's going to be a much more open oval, almost a circle. If much closer to eye level, it's so squished as to almost be a flat line. You might even be able to see that to a certain extent when you look out there at the ones that are on the table. Right? The one that's up there on top of the box, the bottom of it probably looks pretty flat to you because it's right about at your eye level. And then you look, say, the one that's sitting on the table, and you can see more of the curvature on the bottom of it. That's that same process playing out. So I make myself a couple of marks so I know I want to keep that within here. And then I'm going to stand over here while I show it, but I'm going to have to get in front of it when I actually make the drawing. Because if I'm standing over here, sometimes the drawing can get at a weird angle. But what I'll often do is sort of get my hand going in the motion that I need. And when it feels like the actual ellipse that I need is happening, then I'll touch the page and bring my hand around. This is another way where holding the pencil like this, which, again, I'm not going to force you to do, but this helps me with that because I can get a quick motion going and boom, put it down. I can also kind of use my pinky to stabilize. I'll have my pinky like against the paper as I'm doing this kind of a thing. So I'm going to stand in front of you, but I need to in order to make sure that this is straight. So I just kind of get my hand going in this motion. And then when it feels like I'm in the right spot, right? Now, I kind of had a weird bump underneath, but I did right there. So, just like with your circular planes, just fix those things. All right? So there, I have this. Right? This is my ellipse that makes up the bottom of that cone. All right? So then I will kind of eyeball where the center of that is. Right? I don't want you to sit here and spend time like measuring and figuring out the exact center. Just kind of eyeball it. That feels like that's the center of that ellipse to me. And from that spot, you'll give yourself a vertical line. Let me make sure that's vertical. Right? Pull it up probably past what you think the height of that cone would be. Then, at whatever spot you feel like is the right height for that cone, I'll say about there. From that point to each spot on this ellipse, the very furthest point out on that ellipse before the line starts to turn and go the other direction, you need a line that goes from there to each of those points. Now out there, and with this one as well, you'll notice the top is sort of like flattened off. And you'll see in examples from past students that a lot of students will go ahead and do that. But I don't necessarily ask that you do that. If I could find foam, floral foam cones that came up to a perfect point, that's what I would get. In your case, I want you to just bring them up to a point at the top. Right? Don't feel like you have to flatten them off. Some students will just because that's what they decide to do. All right, so I'm going to take my ruler, line it up with that point, and the very farthest outside point of this ellipse before it turns and goes the other direction. And give myself a line right there. And do the same thing on the other side. All right, and then I thought I had an eraser over here. Well, I don't have an eraser. But I would get rid of this line because I don't need that. That was imaginary. And this is below my eye level. And so if it's below my eye level, I'm not actually seeing the bottom of it. In order for it to look like that, where I could see the bottom of it, it would have to be floating above my head so I could see that. That's not happening. So I would also then go in and erase out that portion of the line, leaving myself with that cone. Right? Again, if this is at a higher spot, it's closer to my eye level, then I would be building that with a much thinner, tighter ellipse. Instead of using this, I'm going to use this smaller ruler here. Give myself that line up the middle. there, there. Let me strengthen this. All right, and I would erase out this line and this one. You can see now how this feels like something that's much closer to my eye level because of how much flatter the bottom of that seam is versus this. Whereas again, if it was even lower below my eye level, I'd open that ellipse up. And let me strengthen this line so you can see it better. Right there, it's much more open because there it's much further down below my eye level. Right? That pinching in of that ellipse gives it that feeling of being closer and closer to my eye level. All right. So go ahead, go out there into your spot. Whether you work from standing or sitting for your first drawing, I leave up to you. I'm going to turn the lights off because this is how it will work from now on. Where the lights will be off like this, but there's enough ambient light in the room for you to be able to see your drawing. And the still life is what will be lit really well. Go ahead and get yourself set up. Get your horizon and vanishing point where you feel like it should be. If you're uncertain about it, call me over and I'll take a look.